Cheerio. I forgot to put my stuff on. I have this addiction to Burt's Bees, and no, they're not sponsoring this videos, jackasses. That's Rudolph. Oh, so I want to tell the story about my mother's death. Goodness, Rudy. Thanksgiving 2018. My parents lived in Malta, Ohio. It's a population of 600. The closest town next to it's McConnellsville, about 15,000 people. Great little place. I one time pulled into the little deli there, and I walked out carrying a Red Bull, and a man looked at me and he said, "You drove a long way for that Red Bull." Well, he had noticed a car in the parking lot with Virginia tags, didn't recognize me, and figured that out. I don't drink Red Bull at all anymore. I used to. I used to have a terrible, terrible addiction. I'd spend $8 a day on that garbage, and I don't drink it at all now. My parents were, one Sunday a month, my father drove 50 miles to another town to preach. They were driving home from there, and my father started falling asleep. There happened to be two kids in a pickup truck behind my parents. These kids were in their early 20s, 21, 22 or something. And they actually thought my dad was drunk, but it was 1 o'clock on a Sunday. But they still stayed behind him. They had to take a right-hand turn, and they skipped their turn to stay behind my parents. And within 1 mile of their turn, my father went into the ditch. So it was Sunday night at 8:20, and my phone rings, and it says "Dad" on my phone. Okay, I pick it up, and I said, "What's going on? Why are you still awake?" And it was actually my father's cousin calling to let me know my parents were in a car accident, and they were at the house, and they were picking Rudy up. Okay, Rudy. I'll try to find him. He's a little 17-pound white poodle. He is also 17 years old. But here he is. My parents, it's going to get dark, sorry. My parents liked this dog more than they liked me. So here's Rudy. Hey, Rudy. Can you say hi? Oh, it's kind of dark. Can you say hello? Hi. Say hi, Rudy. Yeah. Okay, here comes Oscar because he's jealous. Oscar, it's too dark. They can't see you. Oh, it's too dark. They can't see you. Anyway. So, 5 weeks after this car accident, my father dies. And he had dialysis. When you get dialysis, you get this thing, I think it's called a fistula, but you only get it 3 times. After it fails the 3rd time, you're going to die. Your dialysis is going to last, hopefully, 10 years. My father was at year 9.5, so he knew the end was near. He was going to die in 2019. His fistula had started to fail. That's right. Okay, so my mother has full-blown Alzheimer's. At this point, it's been 5 years since she has any idea who I am. So every time I spoke to her, I would say, "Mom." "Mom, hand me a napkin. Mom, get me that. Mom." I always said "Mom" to remind her. One time she and I were sitting on the sofa. Excuse me. Not really sure what happened right there. Anyway, so we're sitting on the sofa. And we were talking for 10 or 12 minutes, really a good talk, what I thought. We were talking about memories and stuff. And my mother looks at me and she says, "Now, how are you related to me?" Oh my goodness. Okay, so Dad dies. Before Dad died, my parents lived 5 hours and 30 minutes away from me. And I would get in my car at 9 o'clock at night, drive to Ohio, sleep for an hour and a half, 2 hours, drive somebody to a doctor's appointment, and drive back to Virginia that same, after the doctor's appointment. I pulled into rest stops. I'd sleep all the time. It was just nothing. A lot of people with Alzheimer's get angry, and my mother got angry. So my parents weren't wealthy by any means, but they weren't broke. My father gave me some money, remember, okay, I don't know if I've said this. My father went to dialysis Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That was in Gainesville, which was a 45-minute drive. So a lot of times I would drive up just to take him to dialysis. It got to the point my mother couldn't drive anymore. She'd be driving in the lane, 2-lane highway, 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and all of a sudden she would cross the yellow line and just drive in the other lane. It was crazy. You couldn't drive. So you really couldn't drive with Mom before the Alzheimer's. One time, my brother and I was about 17, so my brother's 20 or 21, and we were sitting in traffic right near our home. Like, man, what's going on? We pull up. We finally round the corner a little bit more, and there's a state trooper there. And I said, what's going on? And he says, some idiot woman flipped her car. So we inched another 15, 20 feet further around the corner, and I said, Ken, there's Dad. That's Dad's car. And Ken looks and he goes, there's my car. My mother had been driving my brother's car, and she flipped it. Well, she had our dog with us, this little poodle that lived to be 24 years old, Vanessa. And so my mother says she's sitting there in the car upside down, hanging from her seatbelt. She looks up, and Vanessa is on the roof. My mom says, I just kind of grab her by the tail, and I pull her. So every time after that, if we said, you want to go bye-bye? Vanessa was right at that door. If my mother said it, Vanessa wouldn't go down the stairs. If I said it and we all got out to the car and my mother sat in the driver's seat, Vanessa would get out of the car. Vanessa would never, ever ride in a car with my mother again. Too funny. Anyway. Okay, so Mom's got full-blown Alzheimer's. Dad dies. They live in this town of 600. My parents, of course, are very active in their church, which has 35 members or so. The people at church, and we have cousins that just live 4 miles down the road, they make a deal. And they make phone calls to Mom, starting, I believe, at 6 a.m., but, 6, 8, 10, 12. They call her every 2 hours. So, the 12 o'clock phone call gets made. No, it must have been the 10 o'clock phone call. And she didn't answer. Well, they continue to call. Well, once the 12 o'clock phone call doesn't get answered, and that's one thing, Mom's got signs all over the house. Answer the phone when it rings, because that's how Alzheimer's people are. We actually had to turn the gas off on her stove because she almost burnt the house down one time. But she always answered the phone. Here's a side note. My parents' cemetery was directly across the street from the little farm. My mother got up every day with Rudy, and they walked across the street and talked to Dad every day. I told you my mom got mad at me because of the whole money thing. She wouldn't speak to me. She never spoke to me once, even the whole last year of her life. I don't fault her for it. Alzheimer's is a mental disease. She didn't hate me. The disease. It was all the disease. But I went into the home right after she died, and there was a picture of me up on the mantle. And I said something to my aunt, her sister, my aunt. And I was like, whoa, there's a picture of me. And my aunt said, well, it's because your dad's in the picture. As long as your dad was in the picture. My mother idolized my father. It was beautiful. They had a spectacular marriage. So, 12 o'clock phone call doesn't get answered. They call the police. When you live in a town of 600 people, the police have your 4-digit garage code. So right as the police arrived, the neighbor who was checking on him, he's got a little four-wheeler, he drives up there. They all arrived just about the same time. The garage door opens. There's my mother lying in the garage, and there's blood everywhere. I had no idea how much blood a human body actually held. Wow. And there's Rudy, red, covered in her blood. They go right to my mom. She's dead, but she's warm. She's completely warm. Okay, my mother was a strong believer in the Lord, as am I. I'm telling you, she was lying on that garage floor thinking, just someone get here to take care of Rudy. Someone. She heard the cars, 2 police cars, and the 4-wheeler pull up, and she said, thank you, God, take me. Go, bring me to Floyd. You know, I have a cat named Floyd. Floyd's named after my father. But I fully believe that's what happened. Well, they're in Ohio. So what happened? What does the police do? What do the police do? They call the animal shelter. They come pick Rudy up. Rudy's red. So we all get phone calls. I'll tell you something. My phone rang. I saw the number and I didn't answer it. It was Thanksgiving Day. And then about 8:15 that night, my phone rings again and it says, Ken, my brother. And I look right at Leanne, one of my very dearest friends, and I said, whoa, somebody must have died. Ken's calling. And I pick it up and I said, hello? And he said, Mom's dead. I went, what? And he said, Mom's dead. And I said, what happened? And he said, she had an accident. And I said, okay, I'll call you back in a few minutes. Because I had to absorb that. Of course, I look right at Leanne and I'm like, my mother's dead. Okay, so here's what happened. The police get to the home. My parents had their little world set up, the 2 recliners. Well, once my father died, my mother always sat in my father's recliner. The recliner was up. The TV was on. My mother loved college football the way I did. She never missed a Buckeyes game, but she watched football. And the TV was turned, and it looked like there was something. She had gone out the very front door, and there was this big, strong, terrible, ugly bush there. She fell into the bush, and it impaled her body a little bit. Okay, well, I guess that did something to her. So she comes back into the house, and she starts walking around. She goes to her bed. She lies in her bed, and the police can tell by the splatter, up on the wall that she lied in her bed. I guess she had also hurt her head because there was blood on the pillow. She went into her bathroom. She tried to wash her face. She went to the kitchen sink. My parents' house was little. It was 1,200 feet or something. They built it for their retirement. She had tried to clean her face. For whatever reason, she went out to the garage. Do you watch that chapter, Mike? The garage. But I've said the garage. I have a sister-in-law from Liverpool, so I've said the garage. I've referred to the garage as the garage for 30 years. Whoa, that got dizzy, didn't it? It's like we were on the Titanic. For whatever reason, my mother went out to the garage, and they had a handicap ramp. She went at the end of the ramp, because there was a railing. There was a bag of clothespins hanging there. The clothespins were on the floor. They think that my mother tripped on the clothespins, fell. She hit her head on the garage floor, and that was the final injury, and that's why they found her. Okay. Rudy, I call him Rudolph, he gets in my feet all the time. 2 times I have fallen to the ground because Rudy's in my feet. Okay, my mother was 81 or 83 pounds at time of death. I'm 5'8", my mother was 5'8". We're tall, thin women. Remember, my mother brainwashed me. If you eat that, it'll go to your ass. All that crazy. I'm not sure that she tripped on the clothespins or Rudy didn't get in her feet. But, okay, so we're making plans. We're going to Ohio. The animal shelter calls and says, pardon me, we've got your dog, your parents' dog. I said, okay, I'll meet you there tomorrow. So we get to McConnellsville, Ohio, around 6:30 the Friday evening, and it's dark. And I pull into town, and there's red cones everywhere, and all the people are lining the streets. What the fuck is going on? And I just kind of pull through the cones, and all of a sudden this cop starts running towards my car, and I roll my window down, and I'm like, I don't know how to get up the mountain without going this way. My mother died. And he looks right at me and he goes, Judy? And I was like, Judy Chapelier. He's like, oh, okay. Look, honey, pull over here. But this town is so small that all I have to say is, my mother died. And he's like, Judy? I mean, they all knew. We had to meet the animal shelter people at the McDonald's. I pull up. They hand me Rudy. He's beautiful. He's bathed. And the woman says, thank you so much for taking him. Most people don't take their parents' dogs. I was like, what? My mother liked that dog more than she liked me. The dog is part of the family. I handed her $50, and she said, oh, no, no, no. And I was like, what? It's $50. She wouldn't take it a second time. And I looked right at her, and I said, if someone hands you someone tries to hand you money a third time, you take it. That is the rule. And that is the rule. The third time, you take it. I said, please, I insist. You took care of... There's the Titanic again. My little thing must be sitting on something. So she took the money. And I took the dog home. And then we dealt with that. And we got very lucky. Someone came to the house about 3 days later and knocked on the door and said, do you want to sell the property? And we're like, yes, absolutely, I do. And I had a settlement check in my hand 40 days later. So it worked out great. I don't really know the one of the video. I just wanted to tell you how my mother died. It was creepy. If you have someone with Alzheimer's and they get mean to you, don't worry about it. It's not your parent or that person. It's the Alzheimer's. Oh, here's something. So when I speak to my brother, I find out she's dead. So I call Morgan County and I speak to the deputy. And of course, he knows exactly what I'm calling. And I said, so look, my mom has Alzheimer's. And had Alzheimer's, and she was kind of very mean. Are you sure it wasn't foul play? And I was kind of being cute, but he chuckled. He said, yes, no, no, no. We had state police come in and do an identical investigation and figure out what happened. So, okay, so there you go. That's the story of my mom's death. Here's Rudy right here. Let's see if we can get him. Rudy. Come on, Rudolph. There he is. See him? Hey, where's the light? There he is. Rudy! So, he's playing deaf right now. I don't think he's deaf. Because I was lying, I have an automatic cat feeder. And it goes off at 6 in the morning. And I happened to be lying there awake one time. And I heard it go off. And I saw Rudy's head go up. Well, my light's terrible, isn't it? Yeah. And, whoa. Goodness, I've had a terrible accident. Okay. But his head went up. So, I think Rudy is selectively deaf. I think that happens to a lot of people. Okay. Hey, so this had nothing to do with true crime. If you liked what I had to say, hit like. Tell me below if you're still watching. I'm completely shocked. But if you have stories like this about your family, let me know. It's not cool. You know what I'm saying. But sometimes it really feels good to talk about it, and maybe it'll make you feel good to talk about it. So, thanks for watching. Hey, really, God bless you all.